Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Impact Farming Show, and today we have a special guest. We have Elaine Froese, who is a speaker, an author, and a farm business coach that helps her clients through difficult and challenging situations around succession planning, business, and the one we all love, communication.
Yeah.
Welcome, Elaine.
Thanks, Tracy.
I am very excited to have Elaine on the show again today, and what we're going to be talking about is succession planning and the concept of fair and equal. So I think a great place to start, Elaine, I always don't want to assume that people know 100% about succession planning. Do you mind just really...
In a capsule?
In a capsule.
Okay.
Start there.
So succession planning is the transition of labor, management, and ownership. And we've changed the language so much too, Tracy, so now we call it transition planning.
Okay.
Because succession used to imply, or sometimes still does, all about finance and tax, or succeeding. It means somebody has to be knocked off the throne for somebody else to succeed the throne.
Okay.
Kind of like the monarchy kind of deal. So in transition planning, everyone, the founders and the people taking over management, the successors, or maybe even being part owners, all have a role in the transition.
Okay.
So succession planning or transition planning is the transfer of labor, which happens with very young farmers. Mm-hmm. Management hopefully happens over time. Our son is 30 and he's co-managing our farm with my husband.
Okay.
And then ownership also can happen over a range of time.
Okay.
But the main thing to understand is that it's a journey and it's a process.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that. You hear succession planning, transition planning, estate planning, all of that. So I really wanted to start by defining that.
So estate planning is your will and your power of attorney and your tax planning for when you're dead.
Okay.
So some people get estate planning confused with succession planning because I'll have a farmer say, oh, Elaine, I don't need any coaching or to go and see my accountant. I've already been to the lawyer and I have a will. I go, your will is your estate plan.
Okay.
A succession plan is really for the living, because who is going to transfer into the management role? That's really the key piece. And also, of course, where the income streams are going to be for the founder and the successor. And if we're talking about income streams, then we're talking about equity and we're talking about asset transfer.
Excellent. That was great.
Okay.
Thank you. So succession and transition for the current estate for when you're gone, so to speak. Did I get that right?
So estate plan is for when you're gone.
Yes.
And what you want your legacy to be and how you want your assets to be distributed when you're dead.
Okay.
But a succession or transition plan is for now. And then if you want to go even one step further, a business plan is for how you actually want to run the day-to-day business and what your vision is for the growth of the business. But you can see how that's all intertwined. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yes. Okay, fantastic. So we are going to talk about succession planning and fair and equal. I like stories, so I'm going to lay the foundation for our conversation here. You are across the table from Sally and Peter. They are dairy farmers from the southern Ontario area. They have 4 children, let's say, 2 children that farm and 2 children that don't. And like many farm families out there, they have kids that farm and they're trying to figure out their future.
Do you want to tell people what the price of land is in southern Ontario?
Yeah, I was going to get to that one as one of those obstacles for succession planning. But we have this farm family here, and I'm sure many people feel it. And you know, if I had children, I'd probably be feeling the same way. You have non-farming children, farming children, and you want to plan, but you know what? You just don't know what to do. You're frozen. And I think sometimes if we don't know the way, we don't know how to do it, we just say, okay, we'll handle it tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow.
And then all of a sudden, 5 years has gone by.
Yeah, and then something happens.
Why do you think the family's frozen, Tracy?
Well, you know, I think probably 2 things. I would say 2 things. One, they don't know what to do. They don't know that process. They don't know the options. And I think the biggest one, and looking at the family that we're talking about here, farming children, non-farming children, how are they going to make that happen if they need to make everything fair and equal?
So first of all, I want to strike equal from the conversation,
Okay.
and from the mindset. And I guess this is where I am taking a different approach,
Okay.
and have just started doing so this January when I gave my first presentation called Finding Fairness in Farm Transition. So my first opening piece is, what is your definition of fair? Or what does fairness look like to you? And I have a friend, Jim Snyder, with BDO in Ontario, whose daughter came in one day into his conversation and said, Dad, I really like this definition of fairness, which is, fair is helping everyone be successful.
I like that.
So Peter and Sally,
Okay.
is that her name?
Yep.
Have 4 children. I'd like to know if they're Dutch or German or
They
Swiss.
might be.
Oh, they might be. Okay. Because that also enters in the equation, which is part of the cultural issue around conflict. And also, I have seen very well-to-do farm families say, well, I'm going to solve this problem by buying everybody their own farm. Well, now with the price of land in Southern Ontario, that's a pretty big price tag, and that's not necessarily going to happen. So if fair is helping everyone be successful, the first thing I would ask Peter and Sally to do is to talk to themselves.
Okay.
And then to talk to each other as a couple and say, what does fair look like to you? Because what I see happening in families is the mom may have had a really bad backstory in her farming career, or not being treated well because of her gender, or because of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she'll be very clear, that's not going to happen to my kids. And so she might think, we have 4 children, they all will get dun 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 dun. And in old European cultures, Tracy, that's part of the culture, that if we have 4 children, they will get dun 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 dun, all equal the same, all this, and that's where the equal part comes up in the conversation. But this is 2018, and to keep the critical mass and assets that you need together for the farm to be viable and profitable, you can't cut it up like a piece of pie. Okay, so I use the acronym FAIR. So the first F is for financial transparency. So Maggie Van Camp, who's a former editor of Country Guide and who's also interviews McGill students on her farm every year, she asked them, when would you like to have financial transparency with your parents on the farm? And they told her, when I get to drive my car, age 16. So you haven't told me how old Peter and Sally's children are.
I would say Peter and Sally's children are actually, they're up there. They're in their 30s. I'm going to say they're a little bit older already.
Like mid-30s?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Peter and Sally have been stalled because this is a big one, and they don't want family
all of a
conflict.
sudden there's grandchildren.
There's grandchildren.
And there's 2 brothers working together, and there's the daughter who's always worked on the farm helping with herd health, and now she's getting her vet degree or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So again, go back to the question, what does fairness look like to you? So as a couple, Peter and Sally have to have some degree of alignment, because if the parents are misaligned, then the children will play one parent against the other and drive a wedge between. And then driving the wedge is really what you're talking about. It's the obstacle of, I don't want there to be a fight,
right,
and I still want the kids to come home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, right?
Yes.
So it's really important in that financial transparency that all the kids have some degree of understanding what the vision is for that dairy farm.
Okay.
And that we need this critical landmass for the herd. And so then the next question is, what does fairness look like to you as the veterinarian? And what does fairness look like to you as the teacher in downtown Woodstock? Okay, so you get information from everybody. And this happened in my own situation, where I got to talk to my parents face to face in July of 1998 when they were working on their transition plan, and I said, I don't expect anything from you.
Yeah.
I'm good. We have our own farm that's been doing well, thank you very much. You need your farm shares to stay with my farming brother. Anything I get from your estate would be a bonus. Now that's the kind of kid that most of my clients want to adopt.
Yes.
They say, where do I find a child like that? And there are lots of well-educated people doing well that will say that. The other thing they'll say is, Peter and Sally, mom and dad, you've worked hard for 40 years. I want you to enjoy the fruit of your labor. I don't want you to give me everything.
Yes.
And then there's also self-respect for the dairy farmers' sons and daughters who are dairy farming to say, I don't want people in the neighborhood to say, well, it must be nice to be you. You were given everything. So there can be a balance of gifting and a balance of rolling things over. And what the percentages of that are come with financial transparency with the family, and then also financial transparency with the accountant. And then we have another problem is what is your expectation of income stream? Right. So then that goes to the A in FAIR. So A stands for what is your attitude towards money? Gimme, 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 take, or I'll receive whatever you decide to transfer. Yes. Right? So every family has savers. Every family, 4 children, there's some savers, there's some spenders. You hear in agriculture the word gold digger or the golden child. Have you ever heard those expressions?
Yes, I've heard of
some golden children? No, you don't have to confess that. So anyway, there's all these money scripts. And if you want to do more on that, my friend Bruce Sellery, Sellery, has written a book called Moolala, Why Smart People Do Dumb Things with Their Money. And if you go to moolala.ca, you can get some of his resources. So my attitude towards money is for generosity and freedom, but I'm at the stage as an entrepreneur and as a farm owner that I'm there. But if you're 35 years old and a dairy farmer and are trying to decide how much you can afford to buy into your father and mother's business and how much debt you can service, money means survival to you. It's a totally different thing.
You're right.
So we have F for financial transparency, A for attitudes towards money, I stands for intention.
Okay.
So what is Peter and Sally's intention?
You know, Peter and Sally, more than anything, they have worked very hard to build this farm up. They love having the farm and they really want the farm to continue on. They do.
So they have a high value for legacy.
Yes.
And also a high value for work ethic.
Yes.
Right.
And they also want to be fair to all their children.
So it really comes back to what they sense as being fair. And quite often I give permission to parents not to sacrifice, Tracy, because the other comment I hear sometimes from farm families, which is really hard to hear, is, Elaine, we're willing to live frugally, or we're willing to sacrifice. And I go, how long have you been doing this?
I don't like that.
No, I don't either. Then I meet the 89-year-old mother who says, Elaine, thank you for reminding my children that I'm not dead yet. Because she is living frugally and she's actually going without, and her children are doing quite well, thank you very much. And really there needs to be a role reversal happening there. So what is your intention? And then where is it written, Tracy, that it's Peter and Sally's job as parents to make all of their children economically equal? Can you tell me where that's written?
You know, it isn't, but that has somehow become the expectation, unfortunately.
But that again is a cultural choice, right? And does money equal love?
Maybe to some people, I don't know.
Yes, it does. To some people.
Yeah.
And I'm just, going through the slides in my head of my presentation, which anybody watching this podcast can see if they just go to youtube.com and Google Finding Fairness in Farm Transition.
We'll put links.
Hour-long presentation, and we'll put links
in the show notes
too.
Yeah.
So I had a case where a roll-top desk was promised to one child, and the other child said, no, it was promised to me, and money, money does not equal love in my books. No. So again, another thing about intention that would be helpful to Peter and Sally is to say, what do we really value here? Okay. And they value richness in relationship because they want the family to continue getting along. Now, if they think there's going to be tension, I would recommend that they get a coach or a facilitator to help facilitate this discussion around what does fairness look like to you, to each of the children separately and the parents, and then bring them all together.
I like
because
that.
there's the last piece, which is roles and rebels, and that's the R.
Okay.
So FAIR, R is roles and rebels. The rebels are the golden children, the entitled ones that no matter how much money has been secretly given, and it's funny, in dairy families I see this happening, there's certain checks for $5,000 that just kind of are not accounted for.
Okay.
So that's enabling, and maybe you have a child who can't launch well or thrive like the other children have, and so that's how the parent is supporting. But the other flip side of that is the rebels who, no matter how much you give, the hand is always out.
Yeah.
And then the role part is for Peter and Sally to say, this transition plan is going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years, because when I'm 71, which is what I'll be 10 years from now, this is what I want my role to be on the farm. But for instance, in my husband's case, and in my case, our income stream will be partially from our personal wealth bubble, which is our non-farm investments, plus our farm. And see, in dairy farms, that's a big problem, because a lot of farmers and dairy farmers don't have personal wealth bubble assets outside of the farm. And that is a concept that's been relayed by Merle Good, who's a good friend of mine from Alberta that many of your viewers will know and have heard him speak. And if you have this personal wealth bubble, then you don't have to rely on all of your income coming from the farm.
I love that. And
but you should have done that when you're in your 40s, not when you're 65, right?
Well, and that's what I'm getting at. You know, one of my next questions for you is, when do we start this succession planning? But I'm younger. I like to think, oh gosh, I don't have to think about that for 30 years yet. I don't have to worry about that. But really, at the end of the day, if I had children and I want to plan, I need to start planning right now, right?
Well, and then, so the question in my audience typically is, and we were at the Ontario Canada's Outdoor Farm Show not that long ago, and one of the questions from the audience was, who do I talk to first? So I always say, start with yourself, go to your spouse, and then I would ask people to really seriously look at getting a financial planner. And they can get financial planning through their banks, their credit unions, the Canadian Institute of Financial Planners. I've spoken to their conference. CAFAnet.com is the Canadian Association of Farm Advisors. But if you look at a financial planner, for instance, they've taken all of my finances and they say, Elaine, you're good till you're 102. Well, that gives me confidence to know that I can start allocating assets now or start a transition plan over a 10-year period, right?
Smart.
And in my in-law case, my sister-in-laws were given a quarter section of land while they were in their mid-30s. What would those dairy farmers feel like if they were given access to equity when they're 35, married with children, and that gives them some certainty for growing equity into their future? It's a beautiful thing. So I've also written an article in terms of fairness, Tracy, called Giving Gifts with a Warm Hand, Not a Cold One. So that's a whole other conversation about how soon do you start gifting and transferring assets, and is that fair? Because then you have the time, opportunity, the cost of money over time, right? Like if money given to you 10 years ago is worth more than money given to you when you're 65.
Absolutely.
There's lots to think about.
There is.
The conversation with a financial planner is really good, because that will determine your personal income streams, look at your personal wealth bubble, and then how that relates to the assets of the farm.
And you know, I think that is such a key part of it. I've seen so many farm families where everything is in the farm, and there's no other revenue stream. So
there's no flexibility.
There's no flexibility. It's either just sell or don't.
Or live very frugally and sacrifice.
Which is not a great thing at all.
Well, everybody's value system is different.
True enough.
No judgment.
No judgment. No judgment. Exactly. Well, I love your definition of fair, and I love the conversation that, you know what, equal doesn't have to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, you don't even have to use it as part of your language anymore. Agriculture needs a mindset shift. We need more helpful language to navigate conflict, because conflict management is a business risk management strategy. If you get really good, if Peter and Sally can embrace conflict and be navigated through it with possibly a coach, a facilitator, or more self-awareness, and get really strong about being firm about what they need as a couple, and not being pushed and bullied by children who think they never have enough.
Right.
You know, and then, you know, another book that I would love listeners to look at is anything written by David Chilton, the wealthy barber.
Oh, yes.
Who's also on Dragon's Den.
Yes.
But he's also gone to many ag conferences, and I've heard him speak several times, and he says Canadians suffer from granite top syndrome.
Oh.
You're not successful, Tracy, did you know, unless you have real granite in your kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I better get to work.
No, that's not true.
I better get working.
He also says that 2 words are not in the vocabulary of millennials, and that would be wait and save. But wait is important in terms of when the timing is right, but wait becomes a negative thing if it becomes procrastination.
Okay.
So Peter and Sally need to embrace the decisions they need to make, not procrastinate, see conflict resolution as a good thing to find out what everybody thinks, feels, needs, and wants. I think, kids, it's time for us to sit down and have a family meeting. Do the in-laws come?
I've never even heard of that. That's a neat idea.
Oh, no, that's the way I work.
Wow.
But in some families, they'll say, no, Elaine, we want just the children first.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, but you know that by creating just the family first, you're also going to create some tension around.
Yeah.
I wonder what they're talking about with us there. Again, so the second stage after just the children first would be to include all the siblings and spouses, like everybody. Okay. And then people say, well, what about farming kids first and then the non-farming children? So that would be even a prior stage. So Peter and Sally could meet first with the 2 farming children that are on the dairy farm with them and say, show me your business plan. So they also, Peter and Sally also want to know that their farming children have a business vision, a business plan, and are totally passionate and committed to this business.
Okay.
Right? Once they get that established, then they'll say, now we need to draw in your non-farming siblings and get an idea of what does fairness look like to you. So I have a little postcard that we can also put in the show notes. So what does fairness look like to you? Is it helping everyone be successful? And is it helping the farm be successful after the farm transition? So this was a nice little reminder card for people just to help prompt those conversations that they need to have.
That's fantastic. That is a lot of good information right there. And you know, I really wanted to have that discussion about fair and equal. And you know, at different times too, we don't have children, but I have thought of that myself. And I go, how would somebody take and try and divide and make sure all kids are taken care of equally, the word that we are going to get out of our vocabulary. So I love that you're changing that conversation.
Well, don't you want everyone in your family to be successful?
Absolutely.
And what you need for success is different from maybe a sibling, right?
Yeah.
And some people have a lot of independence as a high value, and so they don't want a lot of gifts.
Yeah.
And we have a family member like that who would rather prefer to do it their own way.
That's me.
Okay? That's you.
That's me.
You must have a high value for a challenge and independence.
Absolutely.
And that's good.
I don't want anything.
And then you feel good about what you've worked to create.
Yes, absolutely.
So again, Tracy, just to encourage viewers to ask really good questions.
Okay.
And when something strikes you, write it down so that when you do get to that family meeting, you have a very clear sense of what you want to say.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for bringing this conversation changer to our viewers here at the Impact Farming Show. I really appreciate that, and I look forward to having many conversations just like the one today.
Thanks, and I would just encourage people to find me on the web at farmfamilycoach.com or ElaineFroese.com if you know how to spell my name, but farmfamilycoach.com, and there's free toolkits there on the homepage for them, and just really want farm families not to avoid the tough conversations.
I love it. Thank you, Elaine.
Thanks, Tracy.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.